He was a man with everything: wealth, power, and influence. Yet, in one quiet evening, a single moment would shake the billionaire father's entire world. It didn't happen in a boardroom or behind closed doors of a mansion, but in the simplest of places, a restaurant where a black waitress and his disabled son crossed paths. What unfolded in just a few seconds wasn't planned, wasn't scripted, but it carried the power to break down prejudice and rewrite a man's beliefs forever. How could one dance step change a life so completely? For most people, evenings at a fine dining restaurant meant nothing more than laughter, plates clinking, and music playing softly in the background. For Daniel, a billionaire father who spent his life buried in business deals and power plays, it was just another outing, another reminder of the perfect image he wanted to maintain. His world revolved around numbers, contracts, and reputation. But away from the cameras and headlines, there was one thing even he couldn't control: his son, Michael, born with a disability that made simple movements a daily struggle. To Daniel, dining out was a way to forget the pressure, even if only for a moment. He had grown used to the stares people gave his son, the way whispers followed them wherever they went. He pretended not to notice, but deep inside, each glance cut deeper than the last. That evening seemed no different. Polished tables, expensive suits, and the quiet hum of conversation filled the room. Yet, in that carefully crafted world of wealth and pride, a young black waitress moved gracefully between tables, unnoticed by most, but about to play a role that would unravel everything Daniel thought he knew about status, dignity, and humanity. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Waiters and waitresses moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays and forced smiles, while the wealthy guests carried on as if the world outside didn't exist. Daniel hardly noticed them. To him, servers were invisible background noise in his carefully curated life. But his son, Michael, noticed everything. His eyes followed the movements of the young black waitress weaving gracefully across the floor, her smile genuine despite the weight of tiredness in her shoulders. Daniel caught the glance but dismissed it. After all, he'd been taught to separate himself from the help. But then it began. Whispers from the next table. A group of men in suits chuckled as they watched her struggle to carry too many glasses at once. Their laughter wasn't just about her mistake, it was about who she was. A black woman in a room full of power, wealth, and entitlement. To them, she didn't belong. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He was used to arrogance, but something about the tone-sharp, cutting gnawed at him. Still, he said nothing. He never did. Confrontation wasn't his role. Silence kept his image intact. But Michael noticed too. His son's small hand tugged at his sleeve, eyes filled with a question his father didn't want to answer. Why don't you stop them? Moments later, the turning point arrived. The waitress approached their table with a calm smile, pretending not to hear the ridicule. She set down the plates carefully, her hands steady despite the humiliation she endured only steps away. But then Michael did something his father could never have predicted. Struggling to push back his chair, he rose, his body trembling but determined. And with a courage that silenced even the laughter, he reached for her hand. The room froze. Forks paused midair, whispers cut off. The billionaire's disabled son was standing, leaning on a black waitress for support. Gasps spread as he gently nodded, urging her toward the center of the room. She hesitated, eyes darting to Daniel. unsure if she was crossing an invisible line. But Michael smiled, and in that moment, the choice was clear. She took his hand. The music played faintly in the background, soft jazz, never meant for dancing. Yet Michael lifted his foot, slow and uncertain, and she followed, guiding him with patience and grace. It wasn't a perfect step, but it was a step. And in that instant, the laughter turned into silence, an uncomfortable silence that revealed just how fragile prejudice could be when confronted with pure humanity. Daniel's chest tightened. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. His son and this waitress were. The room's judgment shifted not toward them, but toward him. Would he let this moment happen? Would he stop it to protect his image? Or would he finally acknowledge the quiet dignity unfolding before his eyes? The answer would change everything. The room seemed suspended in time. Every eye was locked on Michael and the young waitress as they swayed gently to music not meant for dancing. For a heartbeat, it was beautiful, an innocent moment of courage and connection. But not everyone saw it that way. From the corner of the room, the same men who had mocked her earlier began to sneer louder, their voices dripping with disdain. "Look at this circus," one scoffed. Another chuckled, a billionaire's crippled son dancing with a waitress. "Pathetic." The words sliced through the silence like knives. Daniel's heart pounded. He felt the heat of their stares burning into him, waiting for his reaction. His reputation, his pride, his carefully constructed image, all of it balanced on this fragile moment. If he pulled Michael back, he would regain their approval. If he let it continue, he would expose himself to ridicule. But then it happened. Michael stumbled, nearly collapsing. Gasps echoed, and the men's laughter erupted. For a split second, Daniel saw his son's face straining with determination, yet crushed by shame. The waitress steadied him, refusing to let go, her grip strong and unwavering. She bent down, whispering encouragement only he could hear. In that moment, something inside Daniel cracked. The walls he had built of pride, of prejudice, of silence shattered under the weight of his son's courage and her quiet strength. The laughter rang in his ears, but now it no longer mattered. What mattered was the truth unfolding in front of him, that dignity wasn't measured in wealth, that strength wasn't about control, and that humanity often revealed itself in the most unexpected places. The question hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. Would Daniel finally stand up, or let the moment die under the weight of others' judgment? The laughter faded, but the moment remained. Daniel rose slowly from his chair, not as a billionaire shielding his image, but as a father watching his son fight for dignity and a young woman stand against quiet cruelty. Crossing the floor, he placed his hands firmly on Michael's shoulders and looked directly at the waitress. For the first time, he truly saw her not as the help, but as a human being who had given his son something priceless, the courage to stand. The room grew tense. The men who had mocked now shifted uncomfortably, their smirks faltering. Daniel's silence had once been their permission, but this time his silence broke. With steady words, he thanked her, not just for helping his son dance, but for teaching him, a man with every resource in the world, what true strength and grace looked like. That night, nothing extravagant happened. No headlines, no dramatic applause. Just a simple act of humanity that pierced through wealth, prejudice, and pride. But for Daniel, it was enough to begin a transformation he could never reverse. And that's the point, isn't it? Racism doesn't always erupt in violence or headlines. It often lingers in whispers and laughter and silence. Yet it takes only one act of courage, one step of dignity, to expose it for what it truly is. So the question remains, how many more silent rooms, how many more mocking voices before we learn to stand not with wealth, not with status, but with humanity? Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't begin in the streets or the courts. They begin in quiet rooms with someone who chooses to see, to act, and to change. Will you?